Hi everyone, welcome back to Teen Talk. I'm Bing Chen. Today's episode is all about young people in politics because most of us think that politics is something you truly understand when you're like 40. But today's guest proves that wrong. Today, we're here with Mayor Lopez of Campbell, one of the youngest mayors in our area. Hi, Mayor Lopez. It's so nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, was there ever a moment which made you realize that you wanted to run for the mayor of Campbell?
Yeah, it wasn't uh, something that I necessarily planned for growing up for this particular position, but I knew I had to get involved from a young age. I first got my start when I was in high school. So that's the first thing is that really, for anyone listening, you can have an impact no matter how old you are, especially as a young person, because, for example, I got my start speaking on education issues. And so I realized that no one knew better what was going on in schools and what could be done to better support students than myself and my classmates. So I started speaking out about those issues. Um, so from that point, I knew I wanted to get more and more engaged, and I just wanted to give back in some way with public service. Um, but I don't think there was a moment where I specifically thought it has to be this seat or it has to be this office. I always just try to look for what are the ways in which, given where I am now, and I think this is helpful for any young person to think of, because it's okay if you're not the expert in every topic. You don't have to be, but you should try to do an honest assessment of where you are. So, for example, as a young person, for me, that was on education issues, realizing that I may not be a world-class expert on this, but I do know what's going on in my schools. So look for what is missing from the conversation where you can add your unique perspective. And that was really what I looked for. And so that's what I've always asked myself at every step of my career is, given what I have learned and the experience I do have and the perspective I bring, where can I have the biggest impact for this moment in time? And it's okay if that answer changes. In fact, it should change over the course of your life. But so I got to a point where I felt like the way I could have the biggest impact was by running for city council and later getting appointed as mayor. But you don't have to have any of that planned out when you start. It's just how can I have an impact now?
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Okay. So, do people ever underestimate you because you're young? And how do you deal with it?
I've been really fortunate because, at least in the city of Campbell, we have a history of young people having a big impact as mayors or members of the city council. Prior to myself, someone I got to know was former Mayor Evan Lowe, who I believe he was 24 or so, something around there, when he was first elected. And actually back in the 1970s, so some time ago, but we had a mayor who was 18 years old, and he was the youngest mayor anywhere in the country at that point. So Campbell actually gained some news attention for that. So what that means is that by the time I came around, even though I'm younger, probably compared to the average leader in elected office, people saw that young people had something to offer. And so that's something that whenever you or anyone listening gets into one of these positions, remember that you're making it easier for whoever comes after you. So I had the benefit of that, and I've tried to pay it forward by helping young people get encouraging them to apply for and get appointed to, for example, our commissions, boards and commissions, which I serve on in Campbell. We have a youth commission in Campbell. We have many others. And I've tried to open up those opportunities to young people. So I've been fortunate, but even if you are underestimated, I think it goes back to my original answer, which is you don't have to pretend to be an expert on everything, but look at where you do have unique experience and look for ways to share that because it's harder for people you may not have the credentials or degrees yet, but people can, only you know your own life experience, so you can bring that to the conversation.
Yeah, it's really great. I also hope you can see like more and more young leaders in our area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's your top priority for the city right now?
My biggest one really is always housing. California is the worst housing crisis anywhere in the country, and it's much more difficult in the Bay Area than probably anywhere else in the nation. And so for me, it's personal, as it's a big part of why I first wanted to run for city council in the first place, because I faced housing insecurity growing up with my own family. We actually lost our family home when I was growing up. And so even though we had always been welcomed as a part of the community, it taught me what can happen. And for people who don't have that kind of support system, just how challenging it can be to just try to get by and live here. So housing has always been top of mind. For me, it's been a big priority.
Yeah, definitely. So with 2026 being a major election in California, what recommendations would you give to teenagers who want to get involved, better understand the process, and make a real impact?
Yeah, great question. First off is that there's so many ways that you can get involved. So a big part of how I got my start was just by being able to show up and again, not pretending to be an expert, but saying, I'm willing to help and to learn and to be dedicated, be somewhat reliable. Young people have a lot of competing things going on between school, college applications, sports, other activities. So you need some amount of commitment and consistency. But that said, no one's expecting it to be a full-time job, because people will be understanding and supportive of young people. So I would say that young people, in many ways, actually have a big advantage over people who maybe are a little bit older and trying to get involved in this. You can get involved in making an impact in your community at any age, absolutely. But young people really have an advantage, because people like to see when someone is so committed and passionate. Usually they're not getting paid. They just really care about giving back to the community. So absolutely, in a year like this, there's so many ways to get involved. If you're interested in community events, talking to people, that's a big part of campaigns. It also doesn't have to be on behalf of a particular candidate, because there are groups that put together nonpartisan forums to discuss and debate issues, sometimes forums that focus on particular policy areas such as housing. But I would say either when you see an event or a candidate, something that you like, that you're interested in, they'll usually have contact information somewhere, or if not, you can go to the social media page, and usually by looking at a profile or something, either DM or email is a good way to get in touch with the organizers and say, hey, I really want to get involved. People really welcome that. It's okay to ask questions and even not really know what you're doing at first, because people will want to offer guidance and help, and there just is always a need for more people to get involved.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to mention that I'm a teen advisor who focuses on mental health. And recently I met a teen mom who's struggling to balance school and her family. I really want to help her, but I don't know where to start. Do you have any advice for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Every situation is different, so people are going to need different resources. But what we've tried to do in the city of Campbell is to actually take a look at this issue and focus on people who are on the verge, oftentimes, of falling into homelessness and potentially being out in the streets. And it can be it's easier than you might think for that to happen to anyone. It's just job loss or other economic factors suddenly change, and people might be on the street. So what we found in the city of Campbell, when we did surveys and looked at the data, is that in the city of Campbell, a large proportion of people who either fall into homelessness or they're on the brink of falling into homelessness Oftentimes are young women of color, who have those kind of situations and just circumstances, and they're not able to provide. So what we've done in Campbell is try to provide direct aid. It might be a small amount, but it can be life or death, or life changing for someone in one of those situations. So in Campbell, we're trying to do our part. A good place, especially if you're not in Campbell, for people to start is by the Santa Clara County Office of Supportive Housing. And the county has the widest array of services for residents anywhere in Santa Clara County to try to access. And even if someone doesn't precisely qualify for one of the programs, they will try to direct you to the right place to help. And they have people who are experts in those different areas. So it's a lot can feel like a big issue, but just by knowing where to start, where to begin asking questions, that can oftentimes be the most valuable advice and help you can give.
I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Mayor Lopez. It's been very inspiring for young people like us. And lastly, I'd also like to mention that I'm a stand-up comedian at Silver Valley Stand-Up Comedy Club. And I also organized and hosted the very first Cooper Teens Got Laugh event, which is part of the Mayor's initiative. And it's becoming an yearly event. And I'd love to invite you to this year's show if you're available on October 25th, 2026.
I'd love to come. Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to Teen Talk, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Great job. Yeah.